Hello, my name is Seven Surhack, and today I'm going to be teaching you about intercultural conflict. The main objectives of this lesson are to bring you to a more complete understanding of intercultural conflict, what these conflicts are, what they look like, and how they can be mitigated in a professional or academic setting. This will be done through this video lesson, which will be primarily a lecture format. This lesson will make reference to our textbook, Intercultural Communication in Context, as well as some supplemental material on how to manage intercultural conflicts. The thesis statement for this lesson is as follows. Intercultural conflict can occur on the societal level, international level, and the personal level. Understanding the various contexts in which these conflicts take place will allow a communicator to better mitigate these conflicts and resolve them more effectively in a professional or academic setting. The first question we're going to answer is, what is intercultural conflict? So, according to our textbook, intercultural conflict is usually defined as involving a perceived or real incompatibility of goals, values, expectations, processes, or outcomes between two or more interdependent individuals or groups. There are two main characteristics to intercultural conflict that are relevant to our discussion. The first is ambiguity. What this means is that there is usually a good deal of ambiguity surrounding intercultural conflicts. That's straight out of our textbook. Generally speaking, unless we are very aware of the cultural norms that this person is coming from, it's difficult for us to understand why this conflict may be taking place, because we don't necessarily understand the cultures that are conflicting in this instance. The second aspect of this is language, which means that language in intercultural conflict can often be a barrier to resolving said conflict. And a lot of times when there's a difference of language between two groups, it's difficult for them to come to a mutual agreement on how to resolve that conflict. The final aspect of intercultural conflict that's relevant to this discussion is the idea of contradictory conflict styles, which is the idea that some cultures handle conflicts a certain way, whereas others handle them a different way. And for instance, in the U.S., we generally consider the best way to handle conflicts to be the direct way. You come to someone, you tell them what the issue is, and you work to resolve it. Whereas in some other nations, the indirect route is more favored, as these are lower context cultures. Two other aspects of intercultural conflict that are important to consider are the context and the form of the conflict. So the context could be, is it taking place in a workplace environment, in a personal, social environment, in an academic environment? All of these are relevant considerations to the way you may handle the conflict as opposed to in a different situation. The second aspect that I mentioned is form. Now, this is somewhat of a nebulous concept, as the form of an intercultural conflict could depend on the context or even the specific characteristics of the conflict that you're dealing with. In this instance, the form of the conflict could be considered to be whether it's a conflict between individuals, two groups, two political blocs, etc. These all determine different strategies and ways of handling this conflict. To say a little bit more about the context of this conflict, there are various situations where these conflicts may take place. The first is international, which would be a conflict between two different groups that belong to different nation states, but are still in some form of intercultural conflict. We could look at this as trade wars, economic warfare, even perhaps physical warfare could be considered an intercultural conflict. There's also the societal level, where two groups that occupy different places in the same society are conflicting with each other for various resources or political capital, etc. There's also the personal level, which is, if I was having a disagreement with someone who came from a different culture, that would be a personal intercultural disagreement. There's also the historical context, which these are intercultural conflicts that we look back upon and, try to learn lessons from them. These are generally not going to be very numerous in our context of intercultural communication. And then finally there's the political context, and this would be different electoral blocks that are from different cultures. Pretty much just that. Those would be a political intercultural conflict. There are also various influences on conflict and the conflict style and things like that. One of these influences is cultural values, the specific cultural values of one or the other group that is involved in this conflict. Now, as I mentioned earlier, your culture has a great deal of influence on the way that you may manage certain conflicts. Again, in the West, it is considered the direct route is the best way to resolve disagreements. Maybe not in the intercultural context, but just in general. Whereas in some other cultures, the indirect route may be favored for resolving conflicts. Again, this just shows how your specific cultural background greatly influences the way that you might deal with conflicts. There's also gender, which could be considered some influence on intercultural conflict style. Some may consider that men use a more engagement conflict style, which is more direct, more trying to get what they want as opposed to accommodating the other person's feelings, whereas women may be more likely to use a more accommodating style, whereas they try to resolve the issue while still accommodating the feelings and wants and needs of the other person. Although this is by no means deterministic, this is just sort of a generality, if you will. The final portion of this video will talk about how to deal with these intercultural conflicts, and there are 3 main strategies that I think are the most relevant to a professional or academic setting. The first advice is to stay centered and do not polarize. What this means is that stay focused on what you're actually conflicting about. Don't polarize the issue by trying to make it a moral question or something like that. The second is to maintain contact. This means continually engage with the person. Don't break off and hope that the conflict will resolve itself. 3 is to recognize the existence of different styles for resolving these conflicts. This is very important when dealing with these people from different cultures in academic and professional settings. And with that, it looks like I'm out of time, so thank you for watching and have a great day.